All right, let's jump right into a question that's been around for, well, ages. Who are the true descendants of Abraham? It's a huge family question, and honestly, the answer might not be what you think. So let's get into it. Now, this isn't just about history or theology. We're going to treat this more like a logic puzzle. There are premises, there are arguments, and there are conclusions. But as you're about to see, one of the most common lines of thinking actually leads to a massive contradiction. And that's where the real truth starts to come out. So first, let's unpack the most straightforward argument, the one you hear a lot, the idea that this is all about physical heritage. You know, a direct, unbroken family line. There are groups who argue that to be part of Abraham's family, you have to be a direct physical descendant. The idea is that it's all about this physical connection, something passed down from father to son, generation after generation. And at the very heart of this viewpoint is something called paternal lineage. It's a simple principle. Family identity, the promises, the inheritance, everything flows through the father's line. In this view, the mother's lineage is often just ignored. Okay, so let's follow this logic and see where it goes. Step 1, the main claim is that your family line is determined only by your father. Pretty clear, right? Step 2, a simple, historical fact nobody disputes. Abraham was the father of Ishmael. So if you put those two things together, what's the logical conclusion? Well, it seems unavoidable. Ishmael is literally Abraham's seed, and that would mean his descendants, who are central to Islam, must be included in the family. And this is where our logic puzzle gets really interesting. Because while that logic seems totally sound on its own, it creates a massive internal problem for the very people who often make this exact argument. Yeah. Following that strict rule of father-only lineage doesn't just expand the family tree a little bit, it completely turns the whole exclusive argument on its head. So here's the rub. On the one hand, their own logic says Muslims should be included in the family. But on the other hand, if you ask these same people, their stated belief is that Muslims are not part of the family. You see the issue. Their own argument supports a conclusion that they themselves completely reject. It just doesn't add up. And this big contradiction kind of forces us to ask a much bigger question. If a purely physical definition leads to a logical dead end, well, maybe there's a totally different way to define family in the first place. This brings us to a whole different way of looking at things. An idea that suggests the real connection isn't based on physical birth at all, but on something else, something spiritual. To really get this, let's use a simple analogy, like something you'd hear in a classroom. Think about what makes someone a full, legal heir in a family today. It really happens in two main ways. So you have a physical child. They're born into the family. The connection is blood. But you also have an adopted child. They're brought into the family, not by birth, but by a legal promise, a covenant. Now, is the adopted child any less a member of the family? Any less of an heir? Of course not. They are full heirs. And this analogy, it perfectly illustrates the two ways of seeing Abraham's family. And you know, this idea of a spiritual adoption isn't some modern theory. It's an argument that's actually rooted directly in Scripture, which says that faith itself is kind of like the adoption papers into Abraham's family. The Apostle Paul tackles this exact issue head-on in his letter to the Galatians. He lays out a brand new logic, one that completely resolves that contradiction we were just talking about. Paul writes that you get into God's family through faith. He just tears down all the old physical barriers, your heritage, your social status, and he declares that in this new family, everyone is one. The playing field is totally level. And then he delivers the final answer to our whole puzzle. He says, and if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's seed. You hear that? The inheritance isn't tied to your physical father, but to your spiritual faith. So the takeaway from this whole perspective is crystal clear. The promise God made to Abraham is ultimately fulfilled not through a bloodline, but through a shared faith. That spiritual connection is what truly defines who is an heir. And this reframing, it doesn't just solve a little logic puzzle. It completely redefines the whole concept of heritage and what it means to belong in this context. So we're left with this really powerful final thought. If belonging is determined not by where you come from, but by what you believe, how does that change our whole understanding of family, of community, of inheritance? It really suggests that maybe the most important family tree isn't the one traced in blood, but the one traced in faith.